Okay, welcome everyone to our webinar on amazing proposal teams, how to build them, manage them, and start the flywheel of success. So we're going to get started right now. As I mentioned before I hit record, this webinar is being recorded. So we'll post the recording up to on our website later. And all the attendees are muted, but you can definitely send us questions through the chat. So at any time, send us questions and we'll do our best to answer them. So I want to start with introductions. So we have about 18 people registered today and more are sprinkling through, so I don't have the final number on how many are participating, but thank you all for being here. Today's topic is primarily geared towards people who manage and lead business development teams and who are in a position where they're responsible for setting up and managing proposal teams. But really, it's a topic that's useful for everyone, even if you don't have that specific responsibility. I want to ask the panelists to go ahead and introduce themselves. So I will first start with Joanne. Wait, we didn't hear you, Joanne. Can you start over? Sorry about that.
Yep, there you go. Sorry, I can't unmute myself. So hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Joanne. I've been working in international development for the last 25 years and always had a mix of business development and project management responsibilities. For several years, I was the business development director for the Africa region at Chemonics. And so I was constantly putting together proposal teams. And then later I held different positions that required me to be involved with developing proposal teams and training people about how to develop proposal teams. So I'm very happy to share what I've learned.
Awesome. Thanks, Joanne. Sarah?
I think you have to unmute her too, Suzanne.
I think you're right. Okay. We know the mute button is dangerous. All right. Now you can go, Sarah.
Thank you, Suzanne. Hi, everybody. So I am the consultant success manager at Keylime. So for me, that means trying to really optimize the consultant experience from start to finish and making sure that we have the right talent lined up for our clients. I also am a consultant myself, so supporting a host of different clients with proposal development, improving their business development systems, that sort of thing. So through that, I've seen how several different organizations put together their proposal teams, where they succeed or where they struggle. So I'm looking forward to sharing that perspective with you all. And I also spent several years on a business development team at Chemonics as well, where of course we're always trying to resource bids with the right people.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. So thank you everyone for joining today. I'm Suzanne. I founded Keylime after working for about 13 years, mostly at Chemonics and mostly in business development. And of course, it's no coincidence. That's where, of course, I met Sarah and Joanne working on business development teams together. So for my last 8 years or so, I was the director of business development for the Middle East team. And I founded Keylime really kind of as like a solution to all of the things that I experienced as pain points as the BD director. So you may know Keylime's an online marketplace for international development consulting with a focus on business development, and organizations can search, find, and book consultants kind of like you would on Airbnb. I won't talk a whole lot about Keylime through the presentation, but we will kind of mention things here and there that are resources that we've already invested in that are meant to be helpful for you for things like building great proposal teams. So at Keylime now I work primarily with our client organizations to assess their needs and optimize their experience working with consultants. Just to give you kind of like a snapshot, last year we worked with about 30 different clients on about 75 different proposals. So we work with a wide range of organizations, big and small, some that are new to USAID and some that are kind of part of the top 10 implementers. And it's through that experience, plus my experience as new biz director, that that I was inspired to put together this webinar. So we probably don't have the ability to get an introduction from everyone participating. So instead, we thought we would just do kind of like a random poll of the moment, which is your normal work routine being impacted because of the coronavirus? And that can be your work with proposal teams or just your work in general. I know my answer. So you can go ahead and vote now, and then we'll just sort of read it out. So it looks like it's actually 60-40 with one person who didn't vote, which may be me. I don't know if I actually know how to vote. But anyways, it looks like it's 60-40. I'm surprised to hear that, but I'm based in Lebanon, where we are already in complete lockdown. How does this relate precisely to our conversation today? I mean, I think it's indirect, but proposal teams are such sensitive, animals that I think we can all plan for some pretty significant changes, at least in the very near term, as a lot of organizations move to remote or travel becomes restricted. So it may be just something to keep in the back of everyone's mind as we think through these topics. So we kind of put together a loose set of topics that we are just going to kind of move through in like a discussion style. We definitely want you guys to participate. You can send comments or questions through the box, and then at the end we'll have like a more formal Q&A if we have time, and we will try to answer your questions as we go along, but apologies in advance if we don't get to all of them. So we'll move right into the discussion. I think the first question is like, what does an amazing proposal team look like anyways, One thing that I often think about is proposals are these funny things that have like a relatively low rate of success, like realistically speaking, right? We put a lot of energy into increasing our margin.
Yeah, it looks like Suzanne had a little bit of an issue, so she dropped off and dropped back on. Let's see if that is better now. You're muted, Suzanne, but we can see you again. Suzanne, you're still
Suzanne
muted.
is still muted.
It automatically had you rejoin as muted, so it looks like the connection is better though. So hopefully if you just get off mute, then we'll be able to hear.
Okay, I'm back.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Sorry, everybody. Okay, so what we were talking about was, what does an amazing proposal team look like anyways? And I think where I got cut off was talking about how, amazing proposal teams can just increase your margins of success, sometimes in indirect ways, right? Like it can keep your business development teams motivated because they're interesting and exciting places to work now. And it can make your organization more attractive for partners and for consultants. And great proposal teams can instill confidence in your team members so that what they put out there in the proposal is bold and clear and confident. And weak proposal teams kind of do all the opposite of those things. So I'm willing to bet that stronger proposal teams do win more in the aggregate. But I'm also certain that stronger teams learn more when they fail and when they don't win. And that, I think, is a form of, progress or advancement. And, I would say like a tiny victory, even if you don't win the proposal. So, how do you guys, what do you think is sort of the indicator that your team is strong? How do you just know it when you see it? I want to ask each panelist to maybe just talk 3 or 4 minutes about what you think an amazing proposal team looks like, and how do you know when you've got one? And can you usually anticipate it in advance? We'll pass it to Joanne first.
Okay, so I think you do know when the proposal team is sort of magical. I think it starts to a large extent with having the right people on the team in jobs that suit their skills or their experience, or when you have a combination of less experienced and more experienced team members and they sort of find their groove. I think that a good proposal team is communicating constantly so that everyone is in the loop, and everyone, no matter what the size of the team, knows what's happening, knows how they fit into the team, and knows what to do with the information that they're getting as they're getting it. I think for me also, a really good proposal team is where everyone is contributing and not sort of staying in their box. So I think everybody looks at an RFP or an RFA with a different set of eyes. I know when I was an associate just starting out, I was asking a million questions, and some of the things I was asking about were sort of standard template, and so it was just good for me to understand. And some of the things were actually changes from the standard template that other people hadn't noticed because they were used to seeing the standard template and sort of let their eyes gloss over it. So everyone on the team can sort of bring something different to the table. I think at the end of the day, a good proposal team sort of finds its groove where everybody is contributing in the multiple ways that they can. And you feel like the proposal is both a combination of being responsive and being creative and interesting and something that you actually want to read. So I would think those are important characteristics of a proposal team, a successful one.
Yeah, super great. Thank you.
Definitely felt you whenever you said about getting into a groove, Joanne. I feel like it's one of those things that's sort of hard to, actually define what that means, but usually you can kind of tell when things feel right and definitely when they don't. One thing I would add is, obviously the objective that we have when we put together a proposal team is to build a proposal team that will put together a winning proposal. But you also have to remember that proposals can oftentimes be really stressful for people. So I think it's important to have a team makeup and some of the processes and the communication that minimize that stress for people to the extent possible, because otherwise you're going to end up with folks who burn out or just get kind of turned off to doing business development work altogether if it's this painful thing for them every time. So I know a lot of people, obviously we're biased because we all like doing business development and we find it rewarding and kind of enjoy the pressure and the creativity and that sort of thing. But some people let that pressure get to them. So, and then it just becomes miserable for everybody involved. So, and a miserable team obviously is not very motivated to do their best work or to collaborate productively. So I think you have to kind of balance the goals, right? In the shorter term or medium term, you want a proposal team that is most likely to win, but longer term for an organization, you also want a proposal team that's going to work well together and keep people kind of motivated and interested, and highly engaged down the line in business development as well. So, every proposal is probably a little bit painful, and I think that's okay. But to, you try and manage that a little bit, so that people stay engaged.
Yeah, I think you guys both hit on
100%.
like two main criteria that I always look for in proposal teams. And it's actually, I look to see like how vibrant the discussions are, how much dissent and debate there is, and if team members are able to like find solutions. So it's not so much that great proposal teams are free from problems or that they don't have dissent or they don't have kind of tense moments. It's really like how they make it through those moments. And I think a team that doesn't have any problems or doesn't have any friction or doesn't have some like, intense moments may be just brushing a bunch of, issues under the rug. So that's kind of one like indicator I always look for. And then I think another really simple indicator of a functioning team is like, are they meeting deadlines, keeping promises, and sort of able to follow through on their word, and like, doesn't mean deadlines don't get moved. It's just, was someone able to anticipate it in advance and come up with a plan, and it wasn't pure chaos. But, Joanne, when you and I talked a little bit earlier, you mentioned that putting together great proposal teams is really an art, right? It's not a science. And that really resonated with me. So I wanted to pass it to you to dig a little bit deeper on, the art of figuring out who are the right people at the right time. And I apologize, everyone, we did have a slide that showed the themes of our conversation, but because I got booted off, it's no longer there. But this is one of the first themes we want to talk about is finding the right people at the right time. So I'll pass it to you, Joanne.
Right. So I'm a firm believer that this process is a combination of art and science. So the science of this is figuring out how many people you need on a team. And some of that is dictated by the size of your organization, the time of year, how many bids you have going, et cetera. And occasionally you're going to have to sort of double up on positions and whatnot, because what's ideal and what's real are not necessarily the same things. But where the real art comes from is putting together a team of people who are going to work well together, they're going to have fun, and they're going to make things happen. So for instance, if you have someone leading the proposal team effort who's got a lot of strong technical knowledge, then he or she can bring all of that technical information to the proposal team at every level, which means that then you can have a technical writer who might be less technical in their expertise or knowledge of that specific technical area, and maybe he or she is just a good writer who knows how to synthesize a lot of information and put it together. If you have a highly technical proposal team leader, he or she may not be the best at getting in the weeds. So you need a coordinator or somebody who's managing the proposal team process who's going to be all over the weeds. And then, you always have to have a cost preparer, and usually the cost preparer needs to not only be able to get into the weeds, but also be able to understand how the decision makers need information and how they can make decisions with that information. So oftentimes I think those are sort of your four core people, and how those personalities fit together makes a big difference. If you have a team leader who's hyper organized and like super disciplined and has a lot of strong management skills, then you can have a less experienced coordinator or manager of the proposal, because your team leader can kind of coach him or her through some of the details. Likewise, if you have a proposal team leader who's less technical but has strong management and organization skills, you want to make sure that you have a technical writer who's more technical. And if you can't have that, then you want to make sure that you've identified other individuals with the technical expertise to bring into the team. So it's all about thinking about what you actually need to be successful and then setting each individual up for success. And I think for me, that's the biggest piece of it. Just because somebody is less experienced, either less experienced generally in the profession or less experienced with this particular role, understanding what his or her strengths are and helping him or her understand their strengths, and then really making sure that you're putting them in a position where they can be successful. If it's a newcomer to a particular role, setting them up with a coach or a mentor or someone who's going to be keeping an eye out for them and helping them learn some of the tips and tricks, but also making sure that they're not getting too far behind because they're not sure what to do next. All of that sort of contributes to developing a solid and sort of functional proposal team. I also think that there are just some people who are really strong communicators, and somewhere in that core group, you have to have one person who's a really strong communicator. So I know when I started out, when the dinosaurs roamed the earth and I was an associate coordinating proposals, I often worked with a boss whose name was Dave, who was not exactly known for his organizational skills, but who was also very receptive to someone like me who was, I think, arguably 20 years his junior, saying like, Dave, today's the day I just need you to do X, Y, and Z. I need you to get it done before 9 a.m. and I really don't want any arguments. And he was like, okay, fine. I'll sit down. I'll take care of it. I'll get it done. Like, he really appreciated being managed up because that wasn't his universe. So you also, need to sort of figure out who's going to be able to play those roles, because not everybody on the team is going to be as senior in the organization and whatnot. And so you also need to make sure that there's space to allow people to do what they need to do in the different roles that they're in. I think when people feel supported, that is critical. And so when Suzanne and I were talking about this earlier, we also talked about sort of the critical role that a technical writer plays and how different organizations really view the technical writer role, whether it's truly technical or whether it's someone who is, gifted in other ways. So Suzanne, I want to hand it back to you to talk a little bit about the technical writer in particular, because obviously that's a linchpin in the whole process.
Yes, and you actually got me thinking about kind of this like scenario that often comes up where at Key Lime, I'll be talking to a client and they'll say like, we are, the thought leaders in this field and we have like really serious expertise on this topic. So we need a tech writer who's also, the leading thought leader on this topic. And I always think, I'm like, well, in some ways that could be ideal, but there's some downsides to having sort of too many like lead thinkers in the room. So before I dive into the technical writer specifically, I just wanted to get your thoughts quickly on that, like, having lots of people with sort of thought leadership, or it could be other forms of leadership on the team together.
So yeah, I think it's a good question. And I think what it comes down to is you need to know who the decision maker is. And that person needs to be clearly identified as the decision maker. And all the other technical voices can come into the room, and it's encouraged because everybody comes with lots of different experience and expertise. But that all ultimately has to get wound up into a cogent approach to the RFP or to the project itself. So I think if you have, which I think is a luxury for a lot of organizations, multiple people with expertise in an area, you really need to make sure that one person is clearly designated, whether it's the proposal team lead or the technical writer, as the person who's going to make the ultimate decisions about what's included and what isn't. And I think, as we talked about in the sort of first piece of this, a successful proposal team is one where people can argue out the merits of, one approach or the other. But at the end of the day, somebody has got to make the final decision about which way you're going to go and get it on paper and ready for prime time.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. I think that comes down to like, knowing roles and responsibilities. And I think we're going to talk a little more later about kind of like management of proposal teams and how you achieve that. But to dig in on the, thanks for that, by the way, thanks, on the technical writer. So why are we even taking like an extra minute to talk about the tech writer? I'll say like tech writers have a huge responsibility. And what I've seen over the past, 15 years or so is there's the highest rate of churn with tech writers. We attrit tech writers. We're never like, I'm talking as an industry, we're not like gaining more and more tech writers as the year goes on. We're like losing more and more every day. They quit, they get fired, they get replaced, they get pulled off proposals. And a lot of them refuse to even accept work if the conditions aren't like, perfect. They say, nope, I'm not willing to write a technical, I'm talking about consultants, but even sometimes in-house, I'm not willing to write this proposal because the organization isn't prepared enough, or I'm not sure if this organization is going to be a good match for my work style, or whatever the reasons are. We could probably do an entire webinar just on the topic of technical writing, not in terms of like training it as a skill, but really like how to support tech writers to be successful, how to select the right tech writer. But I would say if we talk about building proposal teams as an art, to me, probably the one only part that might be science is technical writers for proposals should be technical writers for proposals. So this is someone who has probably already written a proposal before. If we're talking about USAID, for USAID program. I have not seen too many cases where there's like a convincing exception. We are often, and I'm even often tempted to take a subject matter expert. Could be someone who is even maybe like a former chief of party of a project, or a technical leader, or someone who has done something like written a strategy for USAID directly, and make them the technical writer. But almost every single time we come to the conclusion that it was a mistake and it doesn't work. And I will admit, like, I made this mistake myself even up until very, very recently. And I ended up writing the technical myself after we couldn't get it to work with the subject matter expert. And I think this is probably the number one mistake that we see at Key Lime. And I saw it when I was a new business director as well. So I think that's probably number one is technical writers are proposal writers with experience as proposal writers. You don't really want to wing it with someone who may be very skilled and have a lot to offer, but this is their first time writing a USAID proposal. I don't think picking the right tech writer is about whether they've won proposals before, because there's a lot more that goes into whether or not a proposal wins. And we've all seen beautifully written proposals lose, and we've seen, not so beautifully written ones win. But there's definitely going to be some trend mark if someone has written enough proposals. But we're talking like after having written proposals for a couple of years, and maybe like after you've written like 10 or more, you might be able to have a trend. But I'm not sure that that's the most important criteria. I think picking a tech writer who is the best complement to your organization's competitive position. You don't necessarily need to replicate your organization's strengths, but you do have to have a way to transfer them. So if you are if you already have like a big country office and lots of people to contribute, you don't necessarily need someone who also has country knowledge, but you do want to make sure that you can adequately transfer that knowledge. So either they can, connect directly, you're confident that your country office staff can communicate with the writer and that the writer will be able to communicate effectively with them. But you don't necessarily need to like duplicate it. Just have a plan to transmit. And then I think also knowing your own organization and how you work with technical writers is really important, because it may not be something that you realize, when you're in your own organization, but every organization does interface with tech writers a little differently. And sometimes even different people in the same organization can interface a little bit differently. So you should be able to tell your tech writer, whether they're internal or external, what kind of resources you will be providing them. Will you be giving them a subject matter expert who will be, doing like a one-time consultation, or will it be something like daily discussions and they'll be like advising them on like a ongoing basis? Is your tech writer going to do in-country research, or will someone do it on their behalf? Do they have access to existing reports, maybe if this is a project that you're an incumbent on? And then at your organization, is the lead writer responsible for integrating content written by others? Or are they writing the content themselves to get reactions from others? Does your organization have maybe an expectation of a certain level of product on round one? If so, that should be communicated. Or do you go through a more traditional, like, okay, here's a rough draft, which we all recognize is going to need some work? Being able to communicate that to the writer, I think is and it's a very important part of the conversation about whether you're selecting the correct writer or not. I think we often talk about like their actual experience, their country knowledge, their technical knowledge, but we don't talk enough about this sort of setup and whether both parties feel like that setup is going to work. Who's leading the strategy? Is it the tech writer, or is it someone else? Who should be the thought leader on the proposal? So I think like, the tech writer often is kind of like, a little bit of like a make or break kind of position. But it's manageable, right? Like, and I think that's kind of really the important thing to take home, is that, it really comes down to how you manage the tech writer, what information you're sharing, and, making that selection based on actual data about your organization. Great tech writers can struggle if the management conditions aren't right. I think when we worked at Chemonics together, Joanne, this is kind of like what you were known for, is like being able to kind of manage the hell out of things, for lack of a better term. But I want to pass it to you to kind of talk, in more detail about kind of that management role that we play to get excellent proposal teams, like managing for excellence. So take it away, please.
Sure. So, yeah, that's my claim to fame. I can manage the hell out of things, and it's true. So I think for me, there's a few things to think about. So one, I think it's important that everyone is on the same page around expectations. So for me, I have an expectation of excellence for myself and for those around me. And that means putting in the hours, working together, asking questions when you don't know things, doing everything possible to get to the best product. So I think setting expectations is really critical. I think the second piece to managing a team successfully is really understanding who is on that team. So shockingly to no one, I'm the girl who turned in all my papers at university 24 hours in advance because I had too much anxiety about being at the deadline at the last minute. There are other people who are writing at 6 in the morning because they were going to get it to you at 10 and it's going to be brilliant. I'm not that girl. But I've learned how to work with that girl or guy, which is to say you really need to touch base with each member of your team and understand what the conditions are for their success. So what I found, and I hope that some of the people on this call who are millennials take this in the spirit with which it's meant. I find that millennials really appreciate when you walk through the process with them and they have a clear set of expectations and they know sort of what they're going to do on day one, what they're going to do on day two, and have it all mapped out. And then you can leave them alone and they'll get the job done. And checking in with them from time to time and making sure they know that they should feel free to check in with you if they're not sure which direction to go or they need a little bit more consultation is fine. I think there are other people who really want to have that, like, 5 minutes of your time every single day. And then there are people like me who are like, okay, I know what I need to go do, leave me alone. I'll see you when the deadline comes around. But really understanding that at the end of the day, a team is a set of personalities. And some of those personalities, and I think more often than not, some of the more experienced personalities will know themselves well enough to know what they need and can articulate that for you. I think as a leader of a team or as a team member who is coordinating and collaborating with other members of the team, you also have to recognize that sometimes people don't know how to articulate what it is that they need. And you have to sort of probe a little bit and help them find the language to be able to say, I'm one of those people who just wants to be left alone until the deadline. Or I'm one of those people who would really appreciate it if every day or every other day you check in with me to make sure we're on track. So I think it's really important to know who you're working with and to really get to understand what you can do to support their success. And for me, it's a partnership. There is not one individual that I have ever met ever who can do an entire proposal start to finish by themselves. So the job is to figure out how to sort of maximize everybody's capacity and really set people up to be successful, because then the proposal effort itself will be successful. I think the other piece to this is reality. So I am definitely a realist. So I think when you start off really working through the calendar, which sounds like such a mundane and not terribly interesting conversation to have, but you really need to make sure that every date on that calendar is realistic. And it could be the difference between, like, look, I have a doctor's appointment on Thursday and you're telling me that this draft is due on Friday, but I think this doctor appointment is going to take up most of my day Thursday. Fine. Don't have it in on Friday, have it in on Monday. There is flexibility at the beginning of the process to work around all of that stuff. And we all have life and it happens. But if you can set up a calendar to be realistic and everybody feels like they're bought into the deadlines there, then as you need to shift things, you deal with the realities. But you really push people to meet the deadlines because these are the realistic deadlines you've set up from the beginning. And I will say, there are some people who think deadlines are a suggestion. I currently live in a country where everyone thinks the rules and deadlines are a suggestion. That's not the case. Deadlines are deadlines. And so that's the other piece to this, is you really need to enforce deadlines, not to be pedantic and annoying, but because they're in place so that every part of the proposal can get the attention that it needs and deserves. Every member of the proposal team can get the feedback that he or she needs to ensure that the final product is successful. And quite frankly, it's out of respect to every other member of the proposal team who has pieces that are all interconnected. So I think it's really important that you have somebody, whether it's the sort of coordinator or proposal manager or the proposal team lead, and ideally both, who are really hitting home the idea that these deadlines need to happen. And even if the draft at a particular deadline isn't what you wanted it to be because you're missing information, better to make the deadline. And if you really can't make the deadline, then let's shift, but let's do it in coordination with everyone else. So for me, I think a lot of the management is really about sort of, being disciplined, but understanding how to help everybody meet those expectations and be disciplined in whatever way they need to be disciplined. I think the other thing for me, and it's the last thing I'll say, is that somebody on the team, usually the team leader, sometimes the coordinator or the proposal manager, needs to be a cheerleader. Proposals are fun. Everyone on this call, me, Sarah, Suzanne, we think proposals are fun. Not everybody thinks they're fun, and certainly deadlines aren't fun and things happen that make them less fun. There needs to be a cheerleader on the team who is really encouraging everybody and checking in with everybody on a regular basis to make sure that they're doing okay. If they need a chocolate fix, they get their chocolate fix. If they need, a caffeine fix, they get their caffeine fix, whatever it is. There does need to be somebody on the team who's really looking out for morale and making sure that the little setbacks don't become sort of devastating, and everybody continues to move forward knowing that we're going to win it because we are in it to win it.
Yeah.
I
really like how
say,
oh, go ahead. Sorry. Keep going.
No, go ahead. I was going to hand it off to you.
Okay. Well, what I really liked is that you've kind of made a clear case that like managing a proposal team or managing proposal teams for excellence is not like a bunch of really kind of like philosophical or lofty goals. It's really practical stuff like, yeah, like taking out the calendar and having like a very, realistic approach to like achieving your deadlines. And I think that's like a very tangible and helpful way to look at things, because oftentimes we want to believe that there's like this like black box of secrets of like how to put together amazing proposal teams or manage group, but it's back to kind of like pretty normal management principles that we probably experience every day, but maybe under the intensity of a deadline and the intensity of the pressure of like, maybe a big, important proposal, we can lose track of those things. So I know it all kind of sounds like maybe easier said than done, like put together a beautiful team, manage.
Oh, did you guys lose Suzanne as well?
Yeah, we did.
Suzanne, but let's assume we've done everything properly and replicating success.
Thanks, Suzanne. We lost a little bit of that, but I think we got the important part. So after the proposal's over, it's so important to like, take a beat, maybe relax for an evening, but then, not think about it for at least a few hours, get a good night's sleep, whatever it is you need. But it's also really important to pause and try and learn from it, whether it was, down the line you find out it was a win or a loss, or whether it was like a really well-oiled machine or kind of a bit of a train wreck. So I think that that's something that, can get neglected because you're ready to move on, but it's really important to just like take a moment and reflect on that as well. So are you guys, you're familiar with the expression, the operation was a success but the patient died?
Right.
So this applies like sadly more often, than we might like. So even the very best proposal teams aren't going to win every time. It's just not the way that it works. So it is really important to celebrate every proposal that is submitted, even if it's not necessarily a win. So like I said, it's easy to want to immediately kind of move on, either onto the next thing or get back to whatever other work it was you were neglecting for the past 30 days or 3 months or whatever it may be. But there are a few things I think are really important to do pretty much right away as well, while everything's still fresh. So the first thing is hopefully something that's fun. Like Joanne said, proposals can be fun. So, and that's just celebrating a submission, right? Like that's an accomplishment every time. And so it's not necessarily like a major, a major celebration, but just taking time to congratulate the team, share with others in your organization about the proposal and that, it was submitted. Maybe do like a happy hour or something similar where people can get together in a little bit more relaxed conditions and just, say, hey, good job, or like, hey, thanks for, the hard work or whatever it is that you felt they really contributed. So just taking a minute to acknowledge the work that was put in can go a long way, I think. The next thing is really a little bit more procedural, but if you're you're on this call, this webinar, and you're one of the people putting together those proposal teams, you should work with either the proposal manager or coordinator to get feedback from the proposal team on how things went. So I know different people have different preferences in how they like to do this. So maybe it's putting together sort of a very quick survey where it only takes people a few minutes to type up their comments, or maybe it's just sending an email asking for more open-ended feedback, whatever it may be. Getting that feedback from the team while it's fresh in their mind is really helpful. And again, if you're one of the people who's putting together these teams, just going and talking to the proposal lead, talking to the manager or coordinator, and hearing from them how they went. Were there areas where they thought things went really well, or maybe they could have used some different support, that sort of thing. So really trying to understand what went well, what didn't, and ideally why, which isn't always an easy question to answer, but trying to get at that why, because that's where kind of the learning actually comes from. So reflecting on any stressful or tense moments that might have occurred, and hopefully figuring out what made them productive instead of just chaotic. Ideally, that's what happened. And so I also always try to encourage the teams themselves, even though they're probably proposal team meetinged out at that point, to also get together again and discuss the feedback that came in, and talk about, in a concrete sort of productive way, some actionable things that could be done differently in the future. If it's, a proposal that went really well, there's obviously things that can be replicated from that. But even when it didn't, there are always sort of, sometimes it's just at the margins, small things like that can be done differently. Going back to what Suzanne and Joanne were just saying is, things like the calendar and being more thoughtful about that, or it's small stuff that can actually end up making a big difference. So getting that feedback. And then again, taking a minute to sort of figure out what individuals did that made a proposal successful, and recognizing them for it can go a long way, both the individual level and just broadly on the team level. Different people like to be recognized in different ways, and hopefully these are people you know and have worked with, and so you kind of have an understanding of what that means to different people. But it's really important to give them that positive reinforcement, or set out practices as a model for others to learn from. So really taking the time to recognize that before you kind of move on to the next thing is important. And then I guess one more point on that is, I forget which one of you said it, but a proposal team is made up of different individuals and different personalities. So if you're on a business development team and you're putting together these proposal teams on a regular basis, use it not just as a learning opportunity to kind of figure out the more procedural types of things, but also for just getting to know those specific proposal team members better. So understanding their strengths and weaknesses, or what motivates them, and try and, take note of that, take stock of it, and put that, to use next time, and build off of that, so that you're continuing to motivate people and kind of put everyone in a position to succeed. Suzanne, do you have anything to add?
I was just going to add to that. I was just going to add to what you said, because I think, just to give a very concrete example, I think for anyone who's on a business development team who's soliciting support from other people within your organization, people also want to feel like the time that they take out to work on business development, because it's often outside of what their real jobs are, even though I believe everybody's job is business development. They're really concrete things that you can do. So I will say this was not my idea, but it's one that I've adopted over the years, which is that you as the proposal team leader or the manager for the proposal can write to somebody's supervisor and say, I just want you to know this was Sarah's first time recruiting for a proposal, and she really excelled. These are the things she did really well. We were really grateful to have her on the team. Like, good job, Sarah, blah, blah, blah. And likewise, if somebody struggled, it's also an opportunity to share that with their supervisor in a constructive way and say, look, one of the things we discovered is that Sarah is apparently gets very stressed out when she has to write under pressure. So we're excited to look for other ways for her to contribute on a proposal team, because we really realized that we caused her a lot of anxiety and stress, and we need to work on ways to reduce that, whatever it is. So they're really like concrete things you can do to make people value the work that they're doing in proposals, because you have demonstrated that it is valuable not just to you, but to them professionally and to the organization.
Yeah, and I think like when you talk about people want to know that their time was like well spent. I think that's so important, like that they made a contribution that was either appreciated, or the organization won the proposal. Nobody wants their time to have been time wasted. And I remember one thing that I used to do often was every time I finished a proposal, I would write down what I felt were kind of like our achievements. It could be individually or as a proposal team. And I would often tell myself, like, so if we lose the proposal, if we're unsuccessful, we still achieved these things. And I remember one of them once it was a personal goal where I said, I want to write a technical only between the hours of like 9 to 5. Like, I'm not going to do any late nights. I'm not going to work on the weekends. And I did it. There may have been like one late night, but, but I largely wrote a proposal between the hours of 9 and 5. And I told people over and over and over again, I was like, even if we don't win this proposal, I've proven that this is possible and anyone can do it. I'm like confident now that anyone can write a proposal between the hours of 9 and 5. And then I made that my practice going forward. We did win that proposal, so I'm happy to say that. But other like kind of like small milestones or goals that I know I've like been able to tease out are things like we discovered like an amazing chief of party, or we built a relationship with a really great subcontractor. And I think like being able to mark your successes. We know the big, success, the big kind of like judgment is, did we win the proposal? But what were your other milestones that you achieved? That's what's going to allow you to replicate the success, because you won't throw the baby out with the bathwater when you look at times when you were, when you did build a great relationship with a subcontractor or with the chief of party, and you can replicate that instance, even if you don't replicate the entire proposal experience. I think we do have some questions that have come in. So we only have we had set an hour aside, so we only have about 5 minutes left. So we'll move into a couple questions. Feel free to send more questions in, and we'll answer as many as we can. So let me just queue up the first question here. So what if things really go off the rails? How do you know when you need to replace a proposal team member? Who wants to take that one?
I'll take it and just say that in my long history of dealing with this, it's been pretty rare that I've actually had to replace a proposal team member. It was not fun once we figured out that we needed to do it. I think the challenge is that if you see somebody who is struggling to meet deadlines and struggling to really even sort of get started, that's a good indication that, you really need to coach somebody and move them through. But when you start to, and I use this word in the positive sense of it, micromanage that person and they're still struggling, I think there's a point at which you need to call it. My experience is generally, if you have a mentor or a coach and somebody who can really work with them, sort of day by day, you may not actually need to pull the section from them, but you may really need to invest heavily in working with them throughout the rest of the proposal effort, and then really sit down with them at the end of the process and reflect on like what was theirs, what was really their coach and their mentor, and how much of this do they think they could do on their own now that they've been through it once before. I think that deadlines are critical in this, and the check-ins are really important. So if you start checking in with somebody and realize, they're still looking at the same blank page they were looking at 2 days ago, and you are struggling to get them to even just write an outline, or you're struggling to get them to start filling in that outline, that's a good indicator that you're going to really need to invest some time to see where that person is headed. Again, I think it's rare, but when it happens, it's better to just cut the cord and find a replacement than to try and really like stumble through. And of course, there's a big difference between if it's your technical writer and if it's your past performance writer. So also like think about, how many points are associated with this person's section, which will give you some sense of how much drama you want to sort of raise around this. It can be a very constructive process. And my general feeling is people know when they're not succeeding. And in some cases, it's really hard for them to acknowledge that, but you are doing them a favor by acknowledging that and either choosing to work with them sort of hand in hand, or saying this isn't the right time for you. Let's find somebody who can get this done and let's look for other opportunities.
I'll just add, Joanne, I think it's also going back to the management piece of that is that you're kind of proactively looking at those sort of issues early on and not waiting until, okay, well, the proposal's due in 1 week and now we've got like, this is a mess. You know, obviously it's much easier to identify those issues earlier. And the earlier you identify them, the less likely you are to actually need to replace a person, because instead you can make sure they have whatever support they need to then succeed in the role. So it really comes down to, you know, if whenever you spot an issue or a potential issue, kind of getting on it early instead of letting it linger and hoping it works itself out.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I think this topic gets a lot of conversation going, and we had a couple actually follow-up questions that came through the chat from you guys. So thank you about this. And it's because it does happen a lot that people are challenged in their proposal roles, because every proposal is a pressure cooker. And when you're working with people of all levels of experience, there's going to be moments of extreme challenge. So I think one thing is just even like kind of preparing for that mentally as like a leader on the team or a leader in the organization is, we know this is not going to be an easy ride, and we know we have to be in an active position, always ready to give someone feedback or give them an abundance of attention and support so that they can be successful. And then teasing out those like rare circumstances where someone is like maybe negligent or sort of unwilling to change their, approach to something, and that requires a kind of a different type of intervention. But I think you keep the team morale by just being really attentive and by being honest, like the others have said. So we only have time for probably one other question, which is we had quite a few come through, but I'll try and do the one that I think is most time sensitive, which is tips for managing proposal teams remotely, given the current travel restrictions. I will chime in here quickly just to say, I actually worked remotely as a new biz director for a year and a half, and it was in 2015, like before, I think, at least at our organization, before it was like a very widespread practice. And I led proposal teams remotely successfully, with winning outcomes. And I think the thing that it really came down to was a very open communication position. So we used Slack, which is sort of an asymmetric communication method. So people could send messages constantly, and I would, address every single message. And it also kept our email traffic fairly low. But I think if you are moving to a remote work situation for like the first time, you should really think about what you're changing. You should not just try and do the same thing, but now from home. It really needs to be kind of some new practices. I'm actually going to put together like a little blog post maybe early next week about, best practices for proposals working remotely. Do you guys want to add to that one? Because I know both of you also work remotely for most of your proposal teams these days.
I know we're short on time, so I'll just say, this is important always, but things like Slack can be really helpful for sort of over communicating, right? Because it's hard whenever you don't actually have that in-person FaceTime, or doing things like this where we're all on video to try and create the sense of connection still, particularly if it's a team that's not used to being remote. At least you have the benefit of knowing each other as real humans, and then you're kind of adapting into different modes of working.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with all that. And I would just say, patience is a virtue, and things, require figuring out. So, on that day when you have a really important conversation to have and it's a huge storm and your internet isn't working or whatever, just pivot. So now we're going to do phone calls because apparently that works. Whatever it is, you just have to be a little bit flexible with the process. Stuff will definitely go wrong and then you fix it.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on because I feel like that's actually all of proposal development. Like stuff will go wrong and then you fix it.
Right.
I want to thank Joanne and Sarah for all of your nuggets of wisdom. It was a very interesting discussion. I hope it was interesting to the attendees as well. We're going to send you guys follow-up information on how to reach us if you have any follow-up questions. And also where you can send us topics that you'd like to see covered in webinars. So thank you all and have a wonderful day. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks.